various forms of mantra, which could be done along with observation of natural breathing. If you've done that, you may have experienced that sometimes, even while you have good intentions, that it's easy to get off course, to neglect awareness of breath and even neglect the mantra. And you find yourself just off someplace else, daydreaming or thinking about something else. Until you become proficient in staying on point, it can be helpful when you do the mantra in that way. On your fingers, some people like to have prayer beads or a little string of beads. That's all right. You can turn the beads as you do the repetitions of the natural breathing, inhalation and exhalation, speaking the mantra with inhalation and exhalation. Or an easy way is on your fingers. You take the thumb here at the first finger and the second finger and the third finger and fourth and fifth and sixth and so on. That way, that finger action, you do that along with the breath observation and the mantra, mental mantra speaking, and that keeps you more involved in the process. And after a while, you can disregard the finger movements and be centered and focused on what you're doing. Remember then, when you're internalized, attention is one-pointed, then you can leave off the mantra and just be still in what Lahiri Mahashaya and other Kriya yogis refer to as the after-effects tranquility that can be experienced. Practice a technique to that stage of inwardness, and the mind is calm, and hopefully even the subliminal, below the threshold of conscious awareness impulses that stimulate thoughts and emotions, they are pacified, and then your mind is absolutely calm and your awareness is clear, and yet you are conscious, you are not asleep. Now, some folks have a little challenge when they meditate, that is, a sleep challenge. They're so accustomed to going to sleep when they relax that when they get to a certain stage of relaxation, especially with their eyes closed, pretty soon they start to nod. Or if they're very heroic, they keep their head up, but they still go to sleep. Frequently they will nod. They go into a light sleep state or a deep sleep state. That is called nidra samadhi, oneness with subconsciousness or sleep. That is not useful in the long run. To avoid going to sleep, number one, avoid being sleep deprived. Obtain a sufficient sleep. Your sleep needs are personal matter, depending upon your physiology. You may need 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, even 9 hours of sleep. And whatever you need, get it, because you'll function better if you are rested. If you become sleep deprived, especially for an extended period of time, you become overstressed and inattentive, start making mistakes, your thinking becomes disjointed. It works a hardship on your body. You don't want to deprive yourself of sleep. Sleep sufficiently, and then when you meditate, stay alert. But if you are inclined, even with sufficient sleep, to drift into a subconscious state when you meditate, because that is the habit that you have when you relax with your eyes closed, then when you notice that happening, then either with intention, stay alert, or open your eyes and look straight ahead without focusing on anything, that blank stare, without letting the eyes flicker. Look at it if you want to now in the distance somewhere without really focusing on it. Just steady gaze, just look. And notice how when you look and hold your eyes steady, that momentarily your breath stops. You stop breathing. You'll start breathing again when you have to. You look straight ahead without focusing, without letting your eyes flicker, and just be there in the moment, present, there. Because you don't have to have your eyes closed to be superconscious. Superconsciousness is a clear state of consciousness other than modified states of waking states, which are modified with thoughts and fluctuations and movements in the mind, and subconscious states, which are obviously modified or conditioned, and even deep sleep or what appear to be unconscious states. In fact, superconsciousness prevails at the level of your essence of being. It is your constant, permanent, natural state of consciousness. But when you are involved, with your attention is involved with externals, and with shifting moods or emotions and thought processes and what's going on out there, then your mind becomes modified, your awareness becomes modified, mixed, and your powers of concentration are somewhat weakened or diminished. And to avoid going to sleep, if you have that tendency, keep your eyes open for a while, looking straight ahead without focusing, still being inward with your attention, but just there like that. In fact, in the Zen tradition, Buddhist tradition, there is a form of meditation called Vapasana or insight meditation, which is practiced with the eyes open. Usually the practitioner sits just in front of a wall, a few feet back from a blank wall, nothing to distract the attention, no fancy pattern on the wallpaper or anything like that, or pictures or anything like that to look at, just a blank wall. And they just sit with their eyes open. And after a while, they aren't even looking at the wall. They're just there and just aware. And the procedure is whatever happens, whatever occurs, be aware of it without judgment. Don't analyze it. Don't get involved with it. Don't try to suppress it. Don't do anything about it. And eventually, you can ignore it. Any physical sensations, any thoughts that rise, any memories that surface, any sounds in the environment, in time, you will cease being aware of them. And your awareness will be clear, superconscious. Remember, that's useful, especially if you have the inclination to either go to sleep into a semi-conscious state when you're meditating, or you're getting involved with mental pictures, mind-produced phenomena, or a lot of free associating and mental stuff going on. Open your eyes and look straight ahead without focusing. And just be there for a while like that and see how peaceful and calm you become and how clear your awareness becomes. I remember during my second and third year with Self-Realization Fellowship, when I was the assistant minister and then the minister at the Self-Realization Fellowship Center in Phoenix, I was there all alone the last 2 years. So I had a regular schedule of meditating every day, about 3 in the morning till about 7, about 4 hours, and then 30 minutes at noon of breath awareness and mantra, and then the evening another 2 or 3 hours. Remember, I was a cloistered monastic, and so that's what I did. And I also wanted to do it for the experience. Some evenings, along about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I just couldn't sit there with my eyes anymore with any enthusiasm. After my 4 hours in the morning, I was resolved to stick it out for the agreed upon duration of time that I had agreed upon within my own mind until 9 p.m. If, like, say, 7:30, quarter to 8, 8 o'clock, there wasn't any point in being there with my eyes closed because I was just just hanging out. Then I would open my eyes and I would turn my chair around toward the altar. It was a small chapel, and we had a little altar there with pictures of the gurus. And I always had a little votive light in the center on the ledge there that was lit. But so that it wouldn't distract my attention when I was meditating, I always turned sideways from it. It wouldn't have that light flickering against my eyelids. The last hour or so, if I just needed to do something else rather than sit there and wait, I would then turn toward the altar with my eyes open and just sit back and just look at the altar. Hang out with the gurus, and that was fun for an hour or so, and that was enjoyable. Let the thoughts come and go. Of course, they're going to be pleasant thoughts and positive thoughts in that environment. At least I would sit it out. I would sit for the agreed upon duration of time. I experimented and I found out that it is possible, if you are so inclined or intent, to sit for an hour or 2 or 3 or 4 to meditate. I read an article a few years ago in a magazine, the result of an interview with the Dalai Lama, and in the course of the discussion, he was asked about his sadhana, his spiritual practice, and he said, "You have to remember, although I am considered the political icon or leader of my people," he said, "I'm first a monk." So he said, "I devote the first 4 or 5 hours of every day to meditation." So here was a fellow who was a very busy fellow with an active agenda, a lot of things to keep up with and to do. Every morning, early, long before dawn, he's up and he starts his routine. He said that he didn't sit there for 4 or 5 hours at a stretch. He would meditate for an hour or so using a certain form of practice. Then maybe he would stretch and walk around for a few minutes and have a cup of tea, and sit down and go for another hour, hour and a half, and then maybe have another short break, and then return to his prayer for the benefit of humanity and the various forms of practice that he used. So it's not always necessary to sit there unmoving for 3 hours, 4 hours if you're going to have an extended practice session. You can change it a little bit. Main thing is to stay alert, stay focused, stay intent on what you're doing. Just don't be there in a semi-foggy mental state waiting for time to pass. That may happen now and then. You'll catch yourself suddenly, oh, I've just been sitting here semi-conscious or unconscious for a while. You learn to meditate by meditating. You learn about meditation from people like me and others who are experienced meditators. You learn how to meditate by doing it. It's not uncommon for beginning meditators to say, I can't sit for 15 minutes because my mind is constantly jabbering and I get restless. Well, anyone can sit for 15 minutes, for heaven's sake, if they decide to, or even 30 or 40 if they decide to. It's just a matter of just making the decision. Your meditation posture should be comfortable, doesn't have to be extreme. I received an email from a gentleman in India some months ago. He attended my lectures when I was there about 4 or 5 years ago. He wanted to report on his activities, and he said, I'm meditating an hour every morning and every evening, but the last 30 minutes of each session is not comfortable because lotus posture is not comfortable for me. I had to advise him that it is not necessary to sit in the lotus posture to meditate. It was not comfortable, for heaven's sake. You don't want to sit there in pain. So I recommended that he modify his posture and, if need be, sit in a comfortable chair. Be comfortable. If you're comfortable in a cross-legged position, that's all right. If you're not comfortable sitting like that, sit in a chair. In fact, I recommend having a comfortable chair, not one that you're going to lounge back in, but one in which you are comfortable when you sit up. And after a while, if it has a straight back and you want to lean back against it, that's all right. If you need to, go chair shopping. Go find a chair that's just right for you and sit in it and see how it feels. Because that's your meditation chair, and you're going to be sitting a lot of hours in that chair over the years. So get a chair that's comfortable for you. And if you have a place in your home where you can set aside just a little place in the corner of a room's all right, for meditation only, that's useful too. Now really, when you close your eyes anywhere, if it's quiet, you can meditate. I like to have a place where I go and sit. That's my place to be when I meditate. I won't get involved with elaborate discussion or fantasy about as you meditate, you build up energy and Shakti and you spiritualize the place and all that. Maybe it does. By association, memories of previous successful, enjoyable meditations there will help you to get back into meditation more quickly. I remember about 2 years ago, a couple formerly from Oregon who now live in Prescott, Arizona, sent me a note. It was after Easter of that year. Said, hi, how you doing? And we recently went to the SRF temple in Phoenix, and I took a picture that we thought you might like, and they enclosed a snapshot. And at the Self-Realization Fellowship Temple in Phoenix, which is now a magnificent sanctuary in the inner part of the building, when I was there in the early 50s, our center was a house with double rooms that were opened up. If we seated 30 people on Sunday, that was a crowd. Now they have a large, magnificent sanctuary out on North Central Avenue. Up on the platform, across the front of the sanctuary, off to one side, is a gold cloth chair, and it's covered with clear plastic, and there's a little sign on the chair. Paramahansa Yogananda sat in this chair in 1948 when he dedicated the first Phoenix temple. When I saw the chair, I said, my God, that's my meditation chair. I sat more than 3,000 hours in that chair. It was the chair that was in the chapel when I was the minister at the center, and which I used every day for meditation. And I didn't know that Master had sat in it. I wish I had. That would have triggered my imagination. I would have said, wow, he sat in this chair. That would have helped. There's the chair. If you ever go to Phoenix, to the SRF Center, up on the platform is that chair as a relic of Yogananda's life and ministry. Stay alert and attentive when you're meditating, and naturally stay alert and attentive when you're not meditating. At all times, especially when driving. There's a constant publicity now in regard to keeping your eyes on the road, both hands on the wheel when you drive. Don't text, to be sending text messages or dialing the telephone, a handheld cell phone while you're driving, because you take your eyes off the road just for a split second, and that vehicle, if it's going 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, goes several yards and you don't see what's happening. It's becoming more and more illegal to text and use a cell phone while driving in many states. So it's not a good idea to let your attention be distracted when you're driving. I read a while back there was a study done. Television cameras were put up in the front of some people's cars so they could be focused on the driver. They could record, see the driver's face and the front part of their body while the driver was driving. And then they had some drivers talk on the cell phone. And while they were driving, and they noticed that when they were driving, their eyes were flickering. They were not fully focused on the road, and they estimated that attention span was diminished by 25% at least, even when you're talking on the cell phone, not just texting, but we're just talking, because your attention is not completely there if you're listening to someone on the phone and you're listening to them and talking back and forth. It's not a good idea to use the cell phone when you drive. You need to use a cell phone, just pull off the road. That's the best way. A little practical recommendation there. And even cars where you can push the button on the dash and talk with both hands on the wheel, that can be distracting if you have a long conversation. Pushing the button and saying, "Hi, I'm on the way, I'll see you in 5 minutes," that might not be too bad. To have an extended conversation while you're driving is not a good idea. Back to our spiritual practice. That's spiritual practice. Everything is spiritual practice if you're attentive, isn't it? The words attributed to Krishna or higher consciousness, skillful living, is yoga. Be attentive at all times. Be alert. In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in the first section of the treatise, mentions various forms of meditation practice, among them contemplation of Om, meditation on Om. Yogananda would say meditate in Om, not on Om, but in Om. Feel yourself in Om. Also, Patanjali mentioned pranayama. Simple pranayama, many of you already know. The word pranayama, by the way, I'll define it. In some popular yoga books, the word is defined as breath control, which is not an accurate definition. It looks like it should be, but it's not. They say prana and yama. Prana would be life force, yama would be restraint or regulation or control. In Sanskrit, when you have a compound word, which pranayama is, it is made up of two words. When the first word ends in A, you drop the A, the silent A. So it is pran, and the word A, the silent A, is implied. So it's life force, ayama, not, means not regulated, not controlled. You regulate the breathing when the process is done effectively, allows the life forces to flow smoothly without being impeded or blocked. A simple pranayama is alternate nostril breathing. Many of you know this one. During the course of a day, when you are physically somewhat balanced and psychologically balanced, you will breathe with more dominance through one nostril for about 2 hours, and then there will be a changeover, and you will breathe for about 2 hours through the other nostril with more force. And this just happens automatically. When the right nostril is dominant, the left hemisphere of the brain is more influential, and when the left nostril is dominant, the right hemisphere of the brain is more dominant. Alternate nostril breathing is done like this. You inhale, exhale, close the right nostril, inhale smoothly, rather deeply, but not forcibly or completely. Momentary pause, close the left nostril, exhale through the right. Momentary pause, Inhale through the right nostril. Momentary pause. Exhale smoothly through the left nostril. That's it. Breathe in through the left, pause, out through the right, in through the right, pause, out through the left. Do that 10, 15, 20 times. And then what will happen, this will contribute to balancing of the force of flow of air in both nostrils, even flow in both nostrils, and therefore coherence or harmonious interaction between both hemispheres of the brain. Situation conducive to meditation practice. Also, the intentional act of doing it keeps you focused. And then after you do 10, 15, 20 rounds of that, then inhale, exhale, and then let the breathing pick up on its own and proceed with meditation. Many people like to do that just at the start when they first sit to get relaxed and focused when they begin meditation. I can remember Paramahansa Yogananda saying at public gatherings, talking with disciples who were there, when we got ready to meditate, he would say, throw the breath, and what he meant was, not quite that vigorously, I'm exaggerating. Exhale, and you'll notice there's a temporary pause when you breathe in and exhale. There's a temporary pause, and you have that temporary peacefulness and poise. Then the breathing starts of its own accord. It begins. And then after a few minutes, you find, or it finds, a natural rhythm, very peaceful, steady flow of inhalation, exhalation. And diaphragmatic breathing, that in itself will reduce stress. And if you want to watch the flow of breathing for a while, that can be done. Then proceed with meditation. You have to learn to relax and be centered and focused if you're going to meditate effectively. And again, in the early stages, observe the changes that occur as your breathing becomes slower and less forceful. Notice how your thought processes become more refined, and it's easier to concentrate. And also we teach a pranayama, Kriya Pranayama, which Yogananda frequently just called Kriya Yoga. Really, it's Kriya Pranayama, or pranayama in this Kriya tradition that is emphasized. The term Kriya Yoga describes total spiritual practice. It includes the mental and physical, emotional, disciplined behavior, and moral behavior, and right behavior. Also profound or in-depth study of metaphysics or higher realities. Self-inquiry, what am I? Not only through the process of intellectual examination, but also of experimentation, meditation, and prayer and other methods for the purpose of discovery. And then also surrender, letting go of the mistaken perception of independent self-identity, or called ego consciousness, egoism, letting that go. That's the primary barrier to self-realization or self-knowing, is that mistaken idea that we are other than spiritual beings, the mistaken idea that we are confined, limited creatures or beings. We want to let that go or transcend it, remove attention from it. When we can do that, then we are more inclined to be able to experience our essence as it is, as pure consciousness. We have to work through our personality and characteristics, through the body and mind, sure. What we call our ego, or our unique viewpoint of self-identity. At the same time, it's helpful to remember that we are not that. We are not any of this stuff. We are not the body. We are not our personality characteristics. We are not contents of the mind. And we are not the mistaken or illusional perception of self-identity. We are not any of these things. You have to have a sense of self-identity in order to function. I've read in some texts published in India where the writer, meaning well and sort of getting carried away with himself or herself, will say, you must kill the ego, you must destroy the ego. Well, no, you mustn't, because you must purify the ego, or purify your understanding of what that viewpoint is. But if you don't have a sense of self-identity, you don't have a viewpoint, you wouldn't have any sense of relationship with your environment. You'd be transcendent. You'd be out of it. If you want to be here and function, you have to have a viewpoint. You don't want to get rid of it, but you want to purify it. You want to see it for what it is. Remember that viewpoint is not you. It's not all of you. It's not the entirety of you. So don't go strutting around and say, well, I'm this person, I'm this being. That's egotism. That's an exaggerated or inflated sense of self-importance, and that's really foolish. It's easier to get off of that because you can see it's foolish and say, gee, that's dumb, and get off of that. It's not so easy if you have a mistaken sense of self-identity and you feel confined and restricted and limited and small. It's not so easy to get off that, is it? Obviously, because very few people are able to look at that from a higher perspective. Not easy. The process is simple, but the doing of it is not simple. But it's helpful to provide yourself the opportunity to be detached from the usual viewpoints from time to time. So when you sit and meditate, use imagination at first. I am an omnipresent, immortal spiritual being. Yogananda, my guru, frequently when he was leading meditation, he would say, reclaim your omnipresence. Imagine that you are omnipresent. Expand until you include everything in your consciousness, and then go beyond that and transcend everything. And sure, it's an exercise in imagination. It prepares the mind and consciousness to actually apprehend and experience that. You can't experience that easily if you're locked into a small sense of self-identity. So you experiment with imagination, how it might be to be omnipresent, omniscient, all-knowing. How would that be? Imagine that. Play with that when you're meditating. Play with that from time to time. Doesn't hurt to experiment. You know that you are progressing or becoming more awake. You just have a sense of having more understanding. When you hear about or read some of the basic philosophical ideas, and it makes sense to you. Like you read the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, the writings of some enlightened person. Perhaps you've read it a dozen times or dozens of times before with some benefit and enjoyment. One day you read it, you say, my God, I didn't see that before. Or I didn't understand that as I understand it now. Why? Because your own innate knowledge is unveiled and beginning to blossom, which is an indication that things are working in the right way. Persistence, that's an important thing. Persistence in the right way. Not a blind consistency, but a wise, consistent approach, always open to the possibility of discovery. That's the way to go. The first time I talked with Paramahansa Yogananda personally in 1949, on Christmas Day, Sunday, after his Sunday morning sermon lesson at the Hollywood Temple. I saw him later in that afternoon, after he had seen everyone else, had a scheduled appointment with him. He spent about 15, 20 minutes with me. That's when he accepted me for discipleship training and told me I could stay. And he gave me some advice on how to fit into the routine there at SRF headquarters and attend to my duties and what to read. He said, read my writings for the first year. That was a lot of material to read. Then he said, read a little and meditate more and think of God all the time. That was his parting shot on that occasion. After advising me what to read a little and meditate more and think of God all the time. So that's been one of my mantras all of these years, more than 60 years. About 3 weeks before he passed, in March 1952 is when he passed, March 7. About 3 weeks before, I was visiting him at his retreat house in 29 Palms, California. And it was cold. The high desert gets cold at night in the wintertime. In the summertime, I saw him when I was visiting. I saw him outside. He would come out for a walk and have me join him as he walked around the property. This was winter. It was cold. So I was invited into his house and shown into his living room. And he was sitting in a large chair, comfortable chair, and had a chair pulled up very close to his chair and had me sit right next to him. So we were there perhaps an hour, just talking about various things. He did most of the talking. I did most of the listening. His final advice to me, final instruction, the last time I talked with him, was this. He said, don't allow your mind to be troubled by what others do or fail to do. And don't look back. And don't look to the right or to the left, but look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime, and you can do it. And that's how he talked to me, very straightforward, in a very paternal way, encouraging way. Don't look back, don't look this way and that way, don't get distracted. Look straight ahead. What is the aim? Self and God realization and liberation of consciousness in this present incarnation. That's it. That's what he meant by going all the way. And then you can do it. I remembered that. That was the last instruction he gave me. I was fortunate in my early years to have that encouragement and that support. It was a great blessing. I look back over the years, recalling good fortune, not getting stuck in the past. That's what he was counseling against, don't get stuck in the past. It was my good fortune that after only 2 or 3 months at SRF headquarters with my fellow monastics, brother disciples, he sent me to Phoenix to help out there and be there. And I was there for the next almost 4 years. The last 2 years I was there as the minister of the Phoenix Center all alone. Absolute privacy and no social life and no television or radio. I read the Sunday paper each weekend to be informed of what's going on in the outside world. The rest of the time I was absolutely cloistered except for Sunday morning and Thursday nights when I conducted services at the center. Occasionally someone would call in one of those short counseling sessions, but very rare. The rest of the time all alone. Didn't talk with anyone. I was happy. Being an introvert, I'm quite content with myself. Sometimes my own best company. That was no problem. I enjoyed the silence. It was marvelous. I didn't have to interact with anyone, not even my brother monastics in California, whom I would visit. I would go to California even after Yogananda passed. I would go over every summer for the convocation, go for the Thanksgiving banquet, all the residents gathered, Christmas, meditation. Yogananda's birthday, we always had a gathering of disciples. And when he was with us, he was present on his birthday. I remember the second year in 1951. I got there in 49, so really in January of 50, I really got settled into the routine. And that was my beginning. In January 1951, at his birthday, the disciples gathered in the chapel at the headquarters, SRF headquarters. And he sat up front and just talked informally with us for a while. Acknowledged some of the disciples who had been there for a long time and other new ones and so on. Told us how pleased he was with us, and he happened to glance over this direction where the monks were sitting, and he saw me. And he said, "Roy is 1 year old." He counted our spiritual birthdays from the time we met him. I was 1 year old in January in 1951. Amazing, I cut off 19 years. There are 4 aims. According to some saints, there are 4 major aims in life to have actualized in order to be happy and fulfilled, to experience total well-being. 1 is to find out what is best for you to do according to the skills and knowledge that you have, and do it well. That is called fulfilling your Dharma, your right way of living. Find out what you can do, use the knowledge and skills that you have, or the knowledge or skills that you can acquire, how to use them most effectively for your highest good and the highest good of others. Then get on with it. 2, learn to have life-enhancing desires and needs satisfied, easily satisfied, so that living is not always a terrible struggle. Learn to have your life-enhancing desires and your needs easily satisfied. Learn to have adequate resources in whatever form required, money and other material resources, supportive circumstances, friends, everything you need for your well-being and to enable you to accomplish your purposes. Learn to have those resources available. Be in the flow, be affluent. 4, be self-realized. Some folks say, well, if I had the first 3, I probably wouldn't think about the other. Yes, you would. Because even if you were super rich and super healthy and had all kinds of wonderful friends and accomplished all the things you ever wanted to accomplish, there'd be an empty place inside of you sooner or later. Something would be missing. You won't be completely happy until you are self-knowing, until you are self-realized. So include that, and have that priority. Not that you must accomplish it or have it actualized first, but include that as far as giving that your attention. First thing in the morning, you wake up, think of your relationship with the infinite. Meditate effectively.